What happens when an actor refuses to compromise his art and a studio executive threatens to destroy his career? Al Pacino answered that question with his fists on the set of The Godfather, defending a scene so authentic that Paramount executives called it dangerous to American values. It was March 15, 1972, day 47 of filming The Godfather at Paramount Studios in Hollywood. The production had been plagued with problems from day one: budget overruns, studio interference, and constant threats to shut down the entire project. But what happened that Tuesday afternoon went beyond typical Hollywood politics. It became a watershed moment that would define the relationship between artistic integrity and corporate control in American cinema. Al Pacino was 31 years old, relatively unknown, and fighting for his professional life. Paramount executives had never wanted him for the role of Michael Corleone. They wanted a bigger name, a safer choice, someone who looked like a traditional leading man. Al was too short, too intense, too method, but Francis Ford Coppola had fought for him, and now Al was determined to prove that the director's faith wasn't misplaced. The scene they were filming that day was crucial to Michael's character arc, the moment when he transitions from reluctant son to ruthless don. It was the meeting with the heads of the 5 families, where Michael would reveal his true nature for the first time. Coppola had written it as a masterpiece of psychological manipulation, showing Michael's brilliant mind calculating every angle while maintaining a facade of reasonable negotiation. But there was something in the original scene that went deeper than the version audiences would eventually see. Something that revealed not just Michael's strategic brilliance, but the fundamental corruption at the heart of American power structures. The scene, as originally written and filmed, didn't just show a gangster taking control. It showed how legitimate institutions and illegal organizations operated by identical principles. Al had been preparing for this scene for weeks. He'd studied real mafia transcripts from FBI wiretaps, analyzed the speech patterns of actual crime bosses, and most importantly, he'd found the emotional truth at the center of Michael's transformation. This wasn't just a man becoming a criminal. This was a war hero, discovering that the America he'd fought for operated on the same brutal logic as the underworld he was entering. The morning of March 15th started normally. Al arrived on set at 6 a.m., went through makeup and wardrobe, and spent 2 hours in his trailer getting into character. By the time cameras rolled at 9 a.m., Al wasn't just playing Michael Corleone. He was thinking like him, breathing like him, calculating like him. The scene was set in a dimly lit restaurant in Little Italy. Around the table sat some of the finest character actors in Hollywood, playing the heads of New York's crime families. The dialogue was sharp, layered with subtext, and Al delivered it with a cold intelligence that made everyone on set believe they were watching the birth of a true screen legend. But it was Al's improvised addition to the scene that created the controversy. As Michael laid out his vision for the future of organized crime in America, Al began drawing parallels between the family's operations and legitimate American businesses. He spoke about politicians, judges, police commissioners, not as corrupt individuals, but as participants in a system where power was the only currency that mattered. The thing you have to understand, Al said as Michael, his voice quiet but commanding, is that we're not criminals. We're Americans. We do business the American way. We identify what we want, we determine what it costs, and we pay the price. The only difference between us and them is that we're honest about what the price actually is. The improvisation was brilliant, dangerous, and absolutely true to the character. It elevated the scene from a simple gangster movie moment to a devastating critique of American power structures. Everyone on set knew they were witnessing something special. Coppola, watching from behind the camera, was mesmerized. This was exactly what he'd envisioned when he'd fought to cast Al. Not just an actor playing a role, but an artist revealing uncomfortable truths about the country and the system that supported it. The scene continued for another 20 minutes, with Al building to a climax where Michael essentially argued that organized crime was simply the most honest expression of American capitalism. The other actors, caught up in the power of Al's performance, responded with their own improvisations, creating a dialogue that was both authentic to the period and terrifyingly relevant to contemporary America. By the time Coppola called cut, everyone on set knew they'd just filmed something extraordinary. But they also knew it was dangerous. This wasn't just entertainment, it was a manifesto. That's when Robert Evans arrived. Evans was Paramount's head of production, a smooth-talking, cocaine-fueled executive who viewed movies primarily as products to be marketed and sold. He'd been opposed to the Godfather project from the beginning, worried that a serious treatment of organized crime would be both boring and controversial. But the early rushes had been so impressive that he'd largely stayed away from the set, trusting Coppola to deliver a profitable film. But someone had shown Evans the footage from that morning's shoot, someone who understood that what Al and Coppola had created went far beyond the boundaries of acceptable Hollywood entertainment. Evans burst onto the set at 2:30 p.m., his face red with anger and pharmaceutical enhancement. He was wearing his trademark white suit and aviator sunglasses, looking every inch the Hollywood executive who believed his power was absolute. Coppola, he shouted across the soundstage. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" The set fell silent. Al was still in costume, still partially in character, his mind still swimming in Michael Corleone's cold logic. The crew stopped moving, sensing that something significant was about to happen. Coppola walked over to Evans, his face calm but wary. "We're making the movie you hired me to make, Bob. That scene you shot this morning, I've seen it. It's not going in the movie. What are you talking about?" Evans pulled out a stack of papers, the FBI transcripts Al had been studying, along with pages of notes about the improvisations. This anti-American propaganda bullshit. This communist manifesto disguised as a gangster movie. I don't know what kind of statement you think you're making, but Paramount isn't going to be part of it. Al felt something cold and dangerous rise in his chest. Not anger exactly, but the kind of focused intensity that had made him a method actor in the first place. Evans was attacking not just the scene, but the artistic process that had created it. "Bob," Coppola said, trying to keep his voice reasonable, "the scene works. It's good filmmaking. It's true to the character and the story." "True to what character? True to what story? I didn't hire you to make a documentary about how America is as corrupt as the mafia. I hired you to make an entertaining movie about gangsters that won't get us boycotted by every patriotic organization in the country." Evans walked closer to the camera setup, looking at the equipment as if it were evidence of a crime. "You want to know what's going to happen to this footage? It's going to disappear. It's never going to see the inside of an editing room, let alone a theater. And if you try to fight me on this, if you try to go over my head to management, I'll make sure neither of you ever works in this town again." That's when Al spoke up. "Excuse me, Mr. Evans." Al's voice was quiet, but it carried across the silent soundstage with perfect clarity. "I think you're making a mistake." Evans turned to look at Al as if he were surprised to discover that actors were capable of speech. "What did you say?" Al stepped closer, still wearing Michael Corleone's expensive suit, still carrying himself with Michael's controlled authority. "I said you're making a mistake. That scene we shot this morning, it's not anti-American. It's the most American thing I've ever been part of." Evans laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. "Is that right? You're going to lecture me about America, kid? I've been making movies since before you learned how to read. I know what American audiences want, and they don't want to be told that their country is run by criminals. But it is," Al said simply. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Every person on that set understood that the conversation had just moved beyond professional disagreement into something much more dangerous. Evans's face went from red to purple. "What did you just say to me?" Al took another step closer. "I said it is, run by criminals. The scene we filmed today isn't anti-American, it's honest about America. And if you can't handle honesty, if you're so terrified of truth that you'll destroy good work to avoid it, then you're exactly the kind of person that scene is about. You little shit," Evans snarled. "You think because you can memorize lines that you understand how the real world works? You think your little method acting bullshit gives you insight into politics and power? You're a nobody. You're a replacement for the real actors who didn't want this part." Al felt Michael Corleone's coldness settle over him like armor. "Mr. Evans, I think this conversation is over. It's over when I say it's over, and what I'm saying is that you're going to reshoot that scene exactly the way I tell you to shoot it, or I'm going to have you replaced. There are 1,000 actors in this town who would kill for this opportunity, and none of them would give me lectures about honesty and truth." Evans stepped even closer, invading Al's personal space in a gesture designed to intimidate. "You know what your problem is, Pacino? You actually believe your own bullshit. You think because you can pretend to be tough on camera that you're actually tough in real life." That's when Al hit him. It wasn't a wild emotional swing. It was a precise, calculated punch, delivered with the same methodical intensity Al brought to his performances. His right fist connected with Evans's jaw just below the left ear, and the studio executive dropped like a stone. The silence that followed was absolute. Evans lay on the floor unconscious, his white suit now stained with blood from a split lip. Al stood over him, his fist still clenched, his face showing no emotion whatsoever. "Someone call security," Coppola said quietly, "and get a medic." Al walked to his trailer without saying another word. 20 minutes later, as Evans was being loaded into an ambulance and Paramount executives were rushing to the studio to assess the damage, Al emerged from his trailer in his street clothes, his makeup removed, his costume neatly hung on a garment bag. "Where are you going?" Coppola asked. "Home," Al said. "I assume I'm fired." "Actually," said a new voice, "you're not." Everyone turned to see Charles Bluhdorn, the head of Gulf+Western, Paramount's parent company. He was a thin, intense man with steel gray hair and the kind of quiet authority that made even Hollywood executives nervous. "Mr. Bluhdorn," Coppola said, clearly surprised, "I didn't know you were coming to the set." "I wasn't, but when I heard that one of my executives had been punched unconscious while trying to destroy what might be the best scene in the movie, I thought I should investigate personally." Bluhdorn walked over to the camera and spoke to the cinematographer. "I want to see the footage from this morning, all of it." For the next hour, Bluhdorn watched Al's improvised performance in complete silence. When it was over, he sat quietly for several minutes thinking. "Mr. Pacino," he finally said, "that was extraordinary work. Thank you, sir." It was also, as Mr. Evans pointed out, dangerous. It makes audiences uncomfortable. It challenges assumptions about American institutions that most people prefer not to examine. Al nodded. Yes, sir. Good. That's exactly what art is supposed to do. Bluhdorn turned to Coppola. The scene stays in the movie, exactly as filmed. What about Evans? Coppola asked. Mr. Evans has decided to take early retirement from Paramount. His replacement will be someone who understands that our job is to support artists, not censor them. Bluhdorn headed for the door, then turned back to Al. Mr. Pacino, I don't approve of violence in the workplace, but sometimes, when artistic integrity is under attack, extreme measures become necessary. I trust this won't become a pattern of behavior. No, sir. I hope it won't be necessary. So do I. After Bluhdorn left, the set remained silent for several minutes. Finally, Coppola spoke. Al, what you did today, punching Evans, that was insane. It could have destroyed your career. Al smiled for the first time that day. Francis, what I did today was defend the work. That scene we filmed this morning. It's the heart of the movie. It's the moment when Michael stops pretending to be something he's not and accepts who he really is. If we'd let Evans destroy it, we might as well have been making a Disney movie. Production resumed the next day with a new executive producer, a new atmosphere of respect for the creative process, and a piece of footage that would become legend among those who were privileged to see it. The scene Al had fought for never made it into the theatrical release of The Godfather. Coppola, despite Bluhdorn's support, ultimately decided that it was too controversial for mainstream audiences in 1972. The improvised dialogue about American power structures was trimmed back to the safer, more conventional version that audiences remember. But the full scene still exists, locked in Paramount's archives, seen only by a select few who understand its significance. It's been called the greatest scene never released, a piece of acting so powerful and politically dangerous that it remains hidden 50 years later. Al Pacino never spoke publicly about the incident with Robert Evans. In interviews about The Godfather, he would mention the intense creative atmosphere on set, the collaborative relationship with Coppola, the challenge of bringing Michael Corleone to life, but he never mentioned the day he defended his art with his fists. Evans, for his part, left Hollywood within 6 months and never returned to film production. He occasionally gave interviews where he described Al as a dangerous method actor who confused reality with performance. He never mentioned being punched unconscious, preferring to let people believe he'd simply chosen to pursue other opportunities. But among those who were on set that day, the story became legend. The day Al Pacino showed that artistic integrity was worth fighting for, literally. The day a young actor stood up to the studio system and won. The banned scene remains in Paramount's vault, a testament to what happens when commercial fear meets artistic truth. Coppola has said that he plans to include it in a special edition release when the country is ready for it. That was 30 years ago. Perhaps the most telling aspect of the entire incident is how little the American film industry has changed. Studio executives still try to control content based on market research and political calculation. Artists still fight for the right to tell uncomfortable truths, and somewhere in a vault in Hollywood, there's still a piece of film showing what happens when those two forces collide. Al Pacino learned something important that day on the set of The Godfather, that talent without courage is worthless, that art without integrity is entertainment, and that sometimes the most important battles are fought not for fame or money, but for the right to tell the truth. The scene that caused so much trouble was about power, how it works, who wields it, and what people are willing to do to keep it. Ironically, the fight over the scene became its own demonstration of those same principles. Robert Evans had power, and he tried to use it to control art. Al Pacino had talent, and he used it to defend truth. In the end, talent won, but only because someone with even more power, Bluhdorn, chose to support the artist over the executive. It's a Hollywood story that reveals as much about American power structures as anything in the scene itself. And perhaps that's why the footage remains locked away, too dangerous for general consumption, too honest about how the system really works. But for those who were there that day, watching Al Pacino defend his art with everything he had, it remains the most important moment in a career full of important moments. The day the method actor proved that his commitment to truth extended beyond the camera, into the messy, complicated reality of making art in America.